This is the Mags on Media television exclusive with American tech guru Harper Reed. South Africans will be heading to the polls in 2014 for our own general election. Traditionally, there's been no significant integration of online, mobile or social campaigning locally. Issues of broadband speed and internet accessibility may have been the main reason thus far, but does technology have a role to play in this country's political landscape?
We should just replace internet with mobile. So the answer to that question is yes. The internet has a huge role to play in developing countries, but it is through mobile. And I actually think that developing countries, especially countries much like South Africa that have poor national infrastructure for broadband, but pretty high penetration of mobile devices, that puts you, I think, at an advantage in regards to how do you connect with people. It allows for some really good crowdsourcing. It allows for some really good use of mobile devices. Now the trick is how do you activate people? How do you get them involved? And I think that's the best way to do that is to create a compelling candidate and a compelling party, and to really create a compelling reason why people should be involved. What ends up happening is you have a lot of people who think that the internet is just going to help, or the mobile is just going to help, but they aren't a good candidate. And so then they blame the tool. They don't realize that they're just not compelling, or they're not interesting, or they're actually not progressive whatsoever. The candidate is the most important thing. You cannot elect a bad candidate with good technology. You can only help a good candidate get elected with good technology. In 2008, there was a vendor that both Barack Obama used and this other Democratic candidate for president. They were in the same primaries, but they used the same technology. And obviously, Barack Obama won. And it was because the candidate was better. It was not because the technology was good. And so you can use the same technology and still screw it up. It's really important, though, that you make sure that the pillars of your campaign, the pillars of your politics fit with what the people want. And then the technology will just fall into place.
Harper also feels there is no reason to be scared of big data. The key is really to have a focused understanding of what you need and what you want.
Let's talk about big data. Who here likes big data? Okay. So one of our big innovations, I said okay because I'm going to disappoint everyone about big data in a second. So let's have a little bit of an intervention with that woman right there who loves big data.
I find it fascinating because big data, when we talk about big data, we're constantly talking about how it's hard to handle all this influx of data. I think that's false. I don't think it's hard. I think that the technology has been getting better, and not slowly. It's been getting very better quickly over the last 5 to 7 years. And when big data, when I first heard the word big data, I think it was 2007, and we were talking about how do we solve some of these problems. And when we were talking about this was about storage. How do you store it? Then it became, and it still is, how do you analyze it? And largely, I think these problems are being solved very quickly. And the other thing is, most of the time when people think they have big data, they actually do not. They have very small data. And it's just about, and I think the question then is, honestly, what is the question they're trying to answer? And so I think it's more about people's lack of understanding of the questions, less than it is about how do they get insight, all of these things. Because it's not easy, don't get me wrong, but it is definitely not as complicated as it once was.
So my challenge for you is to never say big data, just say data. If you want to talk about something being big, let's talk about questions and answers, and how can we talk about what the big answers are? Because honestly, big data is bullshit, but big answers are what you're looking for.
They need to focus on what answers they want, what questions they have. They don't need to focus on data. So you should be thinking, how many of my users are doing this? How do I activate these new consumers? Those type of things. And then try and find the answer to that. And through that, you'll figure out how much data you need, what data is important. And I believe strongly that everyone should store all the data they have, just because you never know what you might need later. But that's easy. That's done. Now the hard part is, what question are you trying to answer?
But with all this information available, are we heading towards a Big Brother society?
We have to be conscious of how data is being used and what privacy means. I'm sure that here in South Africa, there's a much different view of privacy than let's say in the U.S. or in Germany, for instance, or England, and especially with youth. The internet has been popular since, like, let's say 2000, right? And so you have people who are now starting to be adults who were born with only having the internet, you know, and that's the fascinating thing is kids whose entire lives have been, you know, built on the internet, and so their interactions with data and their thoughts on privacy are much different than mine or yours or probably everyone else's. And so I think that that's the hope, is that they're about freedom and they're about democratization of data, of access, and they're not going to allow us to have a Big Brother society.
And even if privacy is of no major concern right now, how do brands and marketers weed through the clutter?
I wouldn't call it clutter. I think it's called reality. For brands to exist on the internet, they have to be genuine. And what ends up happening is they think, oh, well, we just create some good creative and it'll just work. And people are just, they're able to see through it. And you have people who are doing legitimately good work, and it's failing because it's not connecting with the consumer. It's about being genuine, and it's about really understanding your consumer. And I think that you can't be lazy. And you see this constantly.
Let us know what you think of some of Harper Reed's insights on our Facebook page. And that's it from us for this week. Join us again next week for all you need to know about media, advertising, and brand communication.
News that moves. ENCA.com.